the feeling of we can be discussed, meaning we do this, we are this. There's no I in we. It is sometimes said, right? No I in team, no I in we. Uh, but that begs the question of what is the I? And to the present point, the idea seems to be that what I take to be myself is not as simple as it may seem. It may seem that uh, me, myself, and I equivalent simply to this, right? To what can be seen in a mirror, to a single anatomy and such. But that's a simplistic interpretation, right? The body appears in my mind, so to say, in my experience, irrespective of any philosophical implications of that, just as a matter of kind of given fact, right? And consequently, what I conceive as myself uh, need not be strictly limited to a single anatomy, and such is seen on stark display in connection with the we feeling, in connection with teams. For example, it is possible to feel a sense of unity with a group of people, such to where there's no clear distinction, where there's one little kind of atomic, isolated I atom, meaning like a little dot, right? Here's just me, and there's all the other I's. It's just a sense of we. It's a sense of unity. Sometimes people feel that sense in crowds, concerts, and such. Many people enjoy that feeling. I don't want to have such an absolute demarcation around what I take to be myself. I'd rather have kind of porous borders between myself and others. So this opens up again the fact that it is possible, opens up the opportunity of having a we feeling, and consequently, some of the dynamics therein can be explored. What is a good we feeling? What is a bad we feeling? Arguably, a good we feeling, a mature one, is where I do have a strong enough sense of self, right? Such as permits certain elements into myself and assimilates them to my standards and values and such as expels other elements. We see that on the analogy of the body. If the body allowed anything and everything into itself, if there was no separation between the body and its environment, we would die, frankly speaking. That would be a big problem. The whole premise of the anatomy is that um, it assimilates elements around it, right, and expels other such elements. So, for example, I eat something and it doesn't remain in my body in the form that it was in before I ate it. Right? Imagine that that's how it worked. We eat an apple, and the apple is just as a whole sitting inside. Right? We eat a steak, and the steak just as in the picture in an advertisement is just inside of our belly. That would not be fun. Right? The steak, the apple, any other food is digested. Right? The nutrients are extracted. Hopefully, if things are going well, digestively speaking, and things that the body does not need are expelled. Right? We take in oxygen and we expel carbon dioxide. The skin serves as a barrier to prevent germs, to prevent dirt from entering into our system. So that's a good individuality of the anatomy. That's what we want. We don't want to die. We want to live, and consequently, the body should be functioning in that way. It would be no good, right, to suggest, just even imaginatively speaking, oh, just be physically one with everything and everyone, right? Have no skin, have no barrier between yourself and the environment. Just let everything flow into you and through you. No, right? But what would be a problem is, or just as much of a problem, is if we said that, or again, here we're speaking kind of by analogy, just to kind of fantasizing, if we were to say that the body should be construed as something that is essentially and absolutely isolated and apart from any and all other elements. Right? I'm a self-contained whole physically, and I don't need anything else. That means I don't need oxygen. It means I don't need food. It means I don't need water. We see that we would also then, unfortunately, die, because that's also not how it works. Right? We can't draw an absolute demarcation concerning our body. We can't say that here, right, through this, nothing enters. Right? Then we're not going to live. It's a constant circulation. Air, carbon dioxide, food, waste, water, waste, or other hydration, and so on. Right? So physically, kind of, we have an anatomical center, and then we can, again, at least kind of conceptually, as it concerns our envisagement, imagining things, we can kind of allow that the perimeter of our anatomy extends endlessly outward. Because, for example, the food that I eat, maybe it originates thousands of miles away. Maybe it's in my garden, who knows? But even if it's in my garden, then the water that watered my garden came from the clouds, right? And was somewhere else, all this stuff. So there's this tremendous ground that extends in all directions. And everything kind of comes to a point concerning my anatomy and then is assimilated to my anatomy. The bad elements or the unnecessary elements are hopefully expelled. Right? Hopefully things like diseases are conquered before they give us a cold and such. Right? Bad germs hopefully are killed. So that kind of thing. So on that analogy of the anatomy, the self can be construed in a similar way, perhaps. Right? It is equally erroneous to suggest that myself doesn't exist, and I need to be completely one with anything and everything, and I just need to be open to all experience and to seeing anything and everything and doing anything and everything. That is one mistake. And the other mistake would be to say that myself is a self-contained, self-sustained, inherently isolated kind of entity, such that need not make any contact with anything outside of itself. Right? Just as with anatomy, the one would be an error, because then we would destroy ourselves. Just like if the body again had no barriers, and it would die. And just so with us, if I do anything and everything, especially from the moral point of view, if I just look at anything and everything, I take in any kind of content, I think in any which kind of way, I'm going to be, unfortunately, cooked. It's not going to be good. Right? I'm going to skew my mind. I'm going to undermine my psychology. I'm going to wash away the principle of my individuality, and it will be no fun. Conversely, again, if I say no, I'm an atom, meaning I'm isolated. I need make no contact with anything outside of what I take to be myself. I'm also cooking myself. Also no good, because then I will simply, so to say, die of a lack of contact with the environment, from a lack of food, so to say. I need a constant influx of material, of experience, of knowledge, of relationships, and such, in order to sustain myself. But the key would be to assimilate all of it to my unique principle of individuality, to let everything filter through my values, my best understanding of what is true and good and right, and what are my duties and such. That would be the idea. Take in plenty of content, have plenty of experience, but allow it all to be assimilated vis-a-vis high standards of, again, what is good and true and right. But to veer back a little bit more closely to the initial question, which is that sense of we, right? The we feeling then that is desirable would be not that where there's no individuality, right? The first option, I'm just washed away and I'm just one with anybody and everybody. Nor would it be the feeling where, I identify my egoism with another person or another small group of people or an interest group, and now it's we in that sense, like us against everybody. A good we feeling would seem to be where I expand the perimeter of what I take to be myself to include other lives, right? To include other centers of individuality, such as I enjoy myself, right? So that we can live together, so that we can experience each other's company, so that we can share each other's values and interpretations of life, right? So that we can have a free exchange of goodwill between us. That would seem to be a good and desirable we feeling, WE feeling. Now, it can then be said, as it concerns some of those dynamics, that we feeling can admittedly be quite fragile. Right? Meaning, we see that in order to sustain that sense, that palpable sense of us, of we, oftentimes proactivity is required. So, for example, for a company to sustain a sense of we, which is not to say that commercial senses of we are the ideal that was aforementioned, but just as an example, for a company to sustain the sense of we, it may be needed to have retreats, right, and to have luncheons and to have group activities and such. Otherwise, that sense of we might dissolve. We see that people can certainly come together, and consistently so, without any we feeling ensuing. For example, at something like a gym, every day maybe the same people come, but there's no sense of we, because everybody's doing their own thing. Everybody has their own agenda. If the gym wanted to foster that sense of we, then they would probably have to take a proactive stance concerning that goal. For example, having luncheons, having ice cream socials, this and that, to foster that sense of we. Just so it is possible, certainly, for even families to exist without a sense of we. Right? We all live together. We might even support each other materially, financially, but there's no feeling of us. There's no feeling of we. There's no free exchange of love, of goodwill, of knowledge, of care, emotional care at least, and such. So we see that in order to have that we feeling, it is helpful to have, it can be helpful to have physical proximity, but that's not nearly enough, and that's not the main thing. The main thing would seem to be a unity of purpose, a unity of vision, and for would there be a good we, a desire for the welfare of the people that are involved. And that again can be fragile, because we see if people go their separate ways, that we feeling can easily be disturbed. One reason that the we feeling, even in a family, can be not always found would be that people, even in a very close knit unit, can have very different purposes. And it is very hard to cohere with others that have very different purposes than one has oneself. So, for example, to take an example both from movies and real life, there's a crime family. Everybody's in the same business together. We're all mobsters. Let's say it can be quite easy to have a we feeling. We're all on the same page. But if then one of the family members, right, wants to go away from the mob, no longer wants to be part of the gang, no longer wants to partake of the family activities, then that we feeling is that much harder to sustain. Right? Now you have your own purpose, and that purpose might be better than our purpose. You might want to be a good citizen. Right? You might want to engage in charity versus, laundering drugs and weapons and such. But all the same, because it's a different purpose than we have, you're no longer part of our we. It doesn't feel so cohesive this we. It's falling apart. It's fracturing. So we say that, or we can add also, right, that dynamic is seen on display, for example, in children. It's easy to have a strong sense of we with little kids from the point of view of the parent, or when they're sufficiently little, because they don't have a will of their own, or at least maybe they do, and they do, but it's not so obvious for a newborn. Right? It's we. Right? It's mother and child It could be father and child as well. It's a tight, coherent unity. But when the child gets old enough to develop his or her own interests, such as can be at odds with those of the parents, then that we feeling can fracture because it is fragile. So here we see again to conduce to that positive we, sharing the same values, sharing the same fundamental worldview is very important. It's very essential. We have the same values and we have the same worldview. We have the same kind of essential aspirations. Then we can be miles apart. We can be continents apart, planets apart, perhaps one day. And all the same, we can feel a strong sense of we, a strong sense of unity. We have different aspirations, different values, different fundamental worldviews. We can be as close to each other physically as possible. We can be roommates, we can be bunkmates, and still that we feeling might elude us and we can feel alienated from each other. So to that end, then, it would probably be also not ideal to say that foster those we feelings as it concerns any values and any worldviews, because then that would include the we feelings that can ensue in a criminal family, in a group of people that unfortunately have degenerated and dropped from the human ideal. That's not ideal. It's probably better to be in a group of one, but have good values, right? A worthwhile worldview, than to be in a group of a million with bad values, with destructive values, with a destructive, negative worldview. So, first of all, work out my own values, right? Work out my own worldview, such as is as sound as I can make it. And then, naturally, I can have the possibility of a good, positive we with other people that share those same values, that share that same worldview. And then that we feeling still, some work may be needed in order to foster it. For example, regular communication, right? Things like that, bonding opportunities. But those will be kind of they'll make it easy, should we say. You're not going against the grain. Right? We have fundamentally different values, fundamentally different purposes, and now you're trying to bond us over an ice cream social. It's going to be rough. Right? We have similar values, we have a similar worldview, similar fundamental purposes, and even one phone call, even once a year, might be enough to keep that we feeling, right? To keep that feeling of us. Right? So anyhow, those are some comments concerning the we feeling. It is a great feeling, assuming that it is in a healthy, mature context, which would not be either having a completely porous sense of self to where I can just dissolve into any crowd, into any kind of mass movement, into any kind of perhaps drug-induced crowd type of situation. Not that. It wouldn't be to where I insist on a very kind of very, very narrow sense of self and only maybe occasionally identifying it with somebody else that has the same vulgar self-interest as me. Good we feeling also wouldn't be at the cost of good values. The ideal would seem to be have good values, have good purposes, and then try to foster a sense of unity with others with good values and good purposes. So we can consider it. Thank you for listening.